As Rebecca said, I'm Dick Zollars. I'm in the Boylan School of Chemical and Bioengineering. Just out of curiosity, how many people here have used clickers at some time? Couple, okay. I took the plunge 6 years ago. Now the technology I'm going to be demonstrating today comes from Turning Technologies. It is not the only clicker out there. There are in fact dozens of them. I picked it 6 years ago because it had a couple features that I really liked. First of all, it's a radio frequency transmitter, so you don't have to have a direct line of sight from the sender to the receiver. The receiver for this technology is this little dongle sticking out of the USB port here. And as a faculty member, that was the only thing that cost me anything. That's about $100. So the total cost to you is $100 to get going. The other reason I picked Turning Technologies is, in addition to using the clickers, it also allowed you to buy a piece of software, and then you could use any internet-compatible device to participate. So if you had a smartphone, an iPad, a laptop, whatever it was, you could still participate. The other major competitor out there is iClickers. It does the same thing. The software package for Turning Technologies is called ResponseWare. For the iClicker, it's iClicker Go. There are other technologies out there, some newer technologies, where there are no clickers involved at all. It's all handled over the internet, so all you have to do is have an internet connection. Like I said, I started up about 6 years ago. And why did I start? I was teaching a class. It's the first class in the chemical engineering curriculum, the first engineering class, to a class of about 50. And I've had a hard time really keeping everyone involved in the class. Well, with the clickers, it's very easy to keep everyone involved. I said, that was 6 years ago. That class is now 114 people. I teach it in TOD 216, single section. And I can't think of a more discouraging thing than to stand in front of 114 faces and watch them nodding off as you're up there lecturing. This keeps them involved. It also provides immediate feedback. So I know what they're getting and not getting. And is, I think, equally important, they see that they're not the only one in the class who doesn't understand something. You know, there's always a tendency to think everyone else knows this and I'm somehow falling behind because I don't. And then when you see some of the results and you realize you're in there with 80% of the students in the class, you realize, okay, well, that's not so bad then. I use the clickers mainly to probe for misconceptions. It's the hardest thing to overcome in a science-related field is if the students come in with some conception about whatever you're trying to, whatever principle you're trying to use, and it's the wrong conception, trying to break them of that and get them thinking in the way that should is probably the hardest thing. So I use these mainly to try and identify misconceptions. If the responses all show that the students understand the principle, and there's no reason for me to spend class time going over it again. So we'll skip right to the next one. If I see that students really aren't grasping it, then we'll stop and we'll do a short lecture. I hate calling them lectures. We'll have a short discussion about the principle, maybe re-poll the question, and go on. I'll also show you some output that you can get out of the technology. You can use it for whatever you want to do. You can use it for taking attendance. You can use it for seeing how many got it right, how many got it wrong. You can use it to see where the major stumbling blocks are. So, before I get to doing the clickers, how do you uncover misconceptions? Well, I ask a series of questions, but the questions have to have certain characteristics. First of all, they have to contain material that really is focused on a single concept. So that way, if students get it right or wrong, you know what it is that they don't understand. If you've got 3 or 4 concepts all buried in the same question, you have no idea what is the one or more that they're not understanding. It shouldn't require any calculations. Engineering students are very adept at crunching numbers. But I don't want them doing that because it's too easy to make a mistake and then you get the wrong answer and you understand what you're doing, but you just, in the crush of time, didn't get it. So additions, subtractions, multiplications, simple things like that, they might do, but that's really about the extent of the calculations they have to do. Most important thing is there are multiple choice questions. And so you do the question, you have the right answer on there. What do you do about the other 3 or 4 wrong answers? You don't just randomly put them out there. You think, what have I seen in the past in terms of misconceptions about this principle? And if they have that misconception, what would their answer be? And you put that answer up there. So the distractors are actually the hardest thing to do in the questions, is to come up with reasonable distractors that would be the answer if there was a misconception. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run just a real short session. Get out of this one. And what I have up here are 10 clickers. So I will pass those around. Everyone can take one. I'm not sure if we... All right. To set up a quiz like this, it's all set in a PowerPoint format. So you just open up PowerPoint and you'll get an extra tab up on the top. And that extra tab is the one that works with the Turning Technologies. You'll notice here there's one for ResponseWare. I would log in on my computer to the ResponseWare site. It would give me a 6-digit code. I put that digit code here for the session ID. So when the students connect, ResponseWare will ask them for what is the session number. They give it the 6-digit number. Now they're hooked up. Notice they don't have to be in the classroom to do it. If I sent that 6-digit code out via telephone, whatever, they can be anywhere. As long as they're hooked up to the internet, they can participate. So, here's a typical question that I might add. In fact, I've used this in the class. The way I start is I read the question so that our time on answering isn't taken up by reading. So I say, a gas expands through a cone-shaped tube. If the density of the stream is constant, then the mass of the outlet stream is what relationship to the mass of the inlet stream? Is it equal to, less than, greater than, or do you need more information? And I see some people are already punching buttons, because I can look down here and see the responses as they come in. You know you're getting a response because if you press a button and that little light flashes green, that means that you made the connection. I'm going to start this in just a few seconds, but you might try pushing, say, button 5 or 6, and you'll notice you don't get a green light. That means you're not connecting up. If your clicker wasn't working, you'd get the same thing. It would show a red, but you get the green. That means it has been connected. Now, what happens if you want to change your mind? You just push another button. The software only remembers the last button you pushed. So you can change your mind as you go along. It's just whatever the last one is. So I then hit that again, and you'll notice I get a countdown timer. So now they know how long they have to answer. And I know I sent 10 of them out there. Okay, now I've got all 10. Wait just a couple seconds. Okay, now if you tried push the button, it won't let you in. It shows that the polling is closed. I've got 10 responses. I can then go on, and here's what I see as the output. 50% of the people said it was equal to, 20% less than, 3 greater than, or 10% as 3, and 20%. If I saw this in class, what I might do is to say, okay, I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is, but what I will do is I will go down here to this little arrow that's spinned around. I can re-poll the question. So what I would tell students is, all right, talk with the person next to you, the person behind you, whatever. and see if you both agree on the answer, or if you don't, come to a consensus as to what the answer is. And when I click that, same question, the responses are back to 0, and I can go ahead and start the timer again. So you now have time to talk with your neighbor, see if you're in agreement as to what the answer should be, and then two, one. Okay. Aha. This is what I like to see, because answer 1 is correct. The principle we're trying to push is conservation of mass. In the sciences, there are certain properties that are conserved: mass, energy, momentum. This is a conservation of mass. So the mass that goes in has to equal the mass that goes out. Okay. Try another one. I now have air being blown through a cone. Notice I don't say anything about the density now. I don't say it's a constant density. Mass flow rate of air at the outlet is what in comparison to the mass flow rate at the inlet? Again, equal to, less than, greater than, or need more information. Oops. And I need to start the timer. Aha. Do you want to try talk it over with your neighbors again? Okay. Back there, we'll start the timer. I know a lot of students complain that I don't give them enough time, but these are conceptual questions. There are no calculations, so it shouldn't take you that much time. 20 is a little short. Okay, now we're back to more like I'd like to see. The fact that I dropped off the information about the density doesn't matter. Mass is still conserved, so mass in has to equal mass out. Oh, if you like that, here's another one. The density of a gas decreases as it expands through a cone-shaped tube. The mass of the outlet stream is what in comparison to the mass of the inlet stream? Equal to, less than, greater than, or you need more information? Seem to be stuck on 20 seconds. All right. Well, answer number 1 was still correct. The fact that I told you that the density was decreasing has no meaning in the problem. Again, mass in equals mass out. So I will point out there are times, in fact, I did this about a year ago with the College of Engineering and Architecture's advisory board. I did this demonstration, a little more than this. We were doing a thermodynamics problem, and came across one where there was sort of divided votes. So I said, okay, talk amongst your neighbors and come back with an answer. And the people who were getting the wrong answer convinced the people who had the right answers that they were right and the other side was wrong. And so it switched more to the wrong answer than the right answer. And that will happen. So, but this one, if I saw this in class, 80% getting the right answer, there's no point in repolling it, because I can see that the majority of the class are understanding. Now that you got accustomed to that one, we'll try this again. So air is being blown through a cone. The volumetric flow rate of the air at the outlet is what in comparison to the volumetric flow rate at the inlet? Equal to, less than, greater than, or do you need more information? Okay. Rather than repoll, the answer is 4. You need more information. So why do you need more information?
Because it could be less or more. No.
We don't know the rate.
Well, I said there are certain things that are conserved: mass, energy, momentum. Volume is not conserved. So air is a gas, so its volume depends on temperature and pressure. I said nothing about temperature and pressure on the two ends, so I have no idea what the volumetric flow rate is. So I have to have more information on this one. I do not know enough information to come up with an answer. So once we pass that one, then I can turn around and do this and say, okay, the density of a gas decreases as it expands through a cone-shaped tube. The volumetric flow rate of the air at the outlet is what in comparison to the volumetric flow rate at the inlet? Is it equal to, less than, greater than, or do you need more information? And you notice I went with a slightly longer time this time because this is a little more involved question. I will say, well, this is counting down the times when I have the students discussing. It's very interesting to see 114 students suddenly look around to see who they think got the right answer. All right. This would be another one that I might go for a repoll on, in particular because the correct answer, let's see, there were 9 responses, so one person out of this group got it right. And it's 3, it's greater than. Okay. Why couldn't I answer the 4th question? Said I needed more information? Because I don't know pressure and temperature, so I don't know what the density of the gas is. But now you're told what the density is. Well, you're told it's decreasing. Okay. If I need to get a volumetric flow rate, I can take a mass flow rate and divide by the density, and that gives me volume. We know that the mass in equals the mass out. And I'm told the density is decreasing. So mass divided by density at the outlet, since the density has gone down, that ratio has gone up. So therefore, the volumetric flow rate is higher at the outlet than it is at the inlet. I could go on and dig up some others. I could pull up the thermal test if you wanted. No? All right. What I want to
Dick, I'm going to interrupt you
Yes.
just for a second because I just want to show that on the Socrative, on the online polling, they're able to do that on their phone,
Yep.
and we were able to upload the images, and so all of it's right there, and we've had our online individual
Right.
inputting
If-
their answer as well.
If they can pull anywhere.
Yeah.
If you're on if you'd hooked up to this through Response, we're using any smart or any internet compatible device, you actually see the slides. So you see the slides, you can answer. I'll receive the answers here. So as Rebecca was saying, you can be anywhere. You don't have to be in the classroom. You can be anywhere as long as you get that 6-digit code at the start, and that changes every time. So you do need to get that.
If everybody uses a smartphone, they don't need to have purchased this.
Right.
They can just use
You
whatever.
can just use a smartphone. I said the Top Hat Monocle, which is one of the newer, I guess you could call it a clicker type system. They don't have clickers. Everything is handled via some type of internet compatible device. iPhone, iPad, any smartphone, laptop, whatever. But what I did want to show you, if I can get come out of there. There it is. At the end of the session, you can save the results. And so this is an example from the class I had in the fall of one of my results that are saved. Now, if you look on the back of your little clicker there, right under the barcode, there's a 6-digit hexadecimal code. And so each one of those shows up here. What I've taken off of this is when we start the class, I have the students identify who they are with that 6-digit code. And so in addition to this being displayed, there'd be the student's name displayed as well.
What if they're using their cell phone?
I'm glad you asked. If I look way down here towards the bottom, you notice all of these are 6-digit hexadecimal code until I get to right here. These are responseware responses. And it'll have the code and their name displayed as well. If you look at the output here, the greens are where they got the answer right, the reds are where they got the answer wrong, and the whites are they didn't respond. So I can see who's responding, whether they're getting it right or wrong. Down across the side here, I get the number of correct answers and the percentage of correct answers. Down at the bottom, 21% of the class got question 4 correctly. So that would be something I would like to go back over and make sure we really hammer on that concept. 86 and 85% got answers 2 and 3 right. I'll go on and leave those because people seem to be understanding it. You got a question?
Does this record the student's first response or their last response?
Last response. Yeah, you can click around as much as you want.
Did you say how they access the 6-digit code?
It's on
Is
the
it-
back of the clicker.
On the back, so what if they're using their device? How do they,
They come in with this type of code.
how will they know what that code is?
They won't know. But
Oh,
when
creates
when
it.
they signed up for responseware, they were given that
Oh,
serial
okay.
number.
Okay, so it's responseware
So,
is the tool.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not sure there's much more I want to say about the way I've done it, but I will answer questions.
You say in your slide that it can also be used for attendance.
Yep.
Can you address that?
Okay, well, if I take a look up here, there were 85 responses out of a class at this time is down to 101. So that means there were 16 people that did not respond. Now, does that mean they just didn't respond, or they forgot their clicker, or their laptop, or their iPhone, or whatever for the day? Or were they just not there at all? I don't know. But I do let them know at the start of the class period, if you don't bring some device, officially you're not here. But yeah, I know those 85 people were in attendance somewhere. So if I were doing it on attendance, I know who was there and who was not. The other thing I didn't mention here, you can sort of see if you're familiar across the top. This is an Excel file. So I can take this right out of the right out of the software, drop it right into an Excel spreadsheet, and I use Excel for keeping track of all my grades anyway, so this is just another way of, just cut and paste, and you've got all the results done.
I don't know how to do this. I've sat in classes, I've observed classes where faculty asked questions of different kinds. So some were just sort of opinion poll questions. There
Right.
wasn't a right answer. Some were questions that were like practice, where they got, it was a real question and there was a right answer, but it didn't count. And then at some points, then there were ones that were more like quizzes that counted into the grade. So those had to be set up ahead of time, and I
Right.
have no idea how one does that, but
I guess it's maybe an advantage of being in engineering is we don't often ask, what is your opinion on the conservation of mass? Like I said, the hardest thing when I was setting these up, well, these were pretty simple, but the hardest thing setting these up is coming up with the right distractor. I had one that I was thinking about using, or still that conical shaped thing, and the outlet radius was 1/2 the inlet radius, and then it asked, for a constant density fluid, what's the change in kinetic energy? And you do 2, 4, 8, and 16. Because the area through which it flows is radius squared. So if it's only 1/2 the radius, then it's only 1/4. So the velocity coming out has to be 4 times greater. But kinetic energy is velocity squared. So you have to square and square to get 16. But the 2, 4, and 8 catch a lot of people. So.
Do you in your records have, by the way, this is fascinating. Do you in your records have a connection between this code and their student ID and their email address?
No.
I was thinking it'd be great to filter out to those students that might need an invitation to a makeup lab or something based on their performance.
It's possible, yeah.
But don't worry.
Like I said, I've never tried it.
I was
So.
just wondering also with the Blackboard support, perhaps. The replacement of Angel probably will be
Oh.
Blackboard.
This runs independent of class management system.
You said that with the laptop, does it also, can you also have it on a tablet with, say, Bluetooth?
Well, you could do it that way if you were only operating via the internet. This is a radio frequency receiver,
Okay.
and you have to have that to get the signals from the clickers. I said that there are, Top Hat Monocle is one that pops to mind right away, is all internet, in which case, if you had your tablet, that's just fine, because you'll be on the internet along with all the students. I will point out one thing that is maybe a handicap to going all internet compatible devices. I said I was doing this with a class that started at 114 and Todd 216, and you can't see it. About a third of my responses were through ResponseWare. That was about the limit of the bandwidth in the class. If I had all 114 students trying to get on the internet to do something, it just wouldn't have handled it in that class. On the other hand, 114 students with radio frequency clickers, not a problem. There is one other thing I will point out. If you notice the responses, a really good one, I got 80% correct, but there were others where it wasn't nearly that much. The people I've worked with on setting up these questions say that a really good question, only about a third of the people will get it right the first time. So I get a lot of students worrying when I pop this up and see, I don't have one up here. I scroll down. When I see this score right here, and the person only got about 29% correct, and they're worried, well, how does that affect my grade? And I tell them, at least in my class, I grade you more on being a participant in the class, not so much on whether you get them all right or all wrong. But I want you in there participating. On the other hand, if I got someone, I don't see an example here, that was wrong all the way across the board, I could take that either they're really not getting anything in the class or they just randomly pushing buttons and happened not to ever get a right one when they pushed it. But no, because the students always like to say, you're trying to trick us. No, I'm probing for misconceptions, which means the wrong answers look really attractive. And so I don't grade so much on percent right as were you in there really trying to do this? And once that thought that, if I make a wrong answer, it's going to knock my grade down, once they get over that, then they're a lot more willing to participate.
Can you please talk a minute about how the setup for the polling works? Do you have to do something inside your PowerPoint to set up the poll?
Let me see if I can. Let me just drop this one out of here and pull this one back up. If I go over here to the new, I can click on new, create a new spreadsheet, and it will have options for me as to what type of question do you want to ask. I can do multiple choice with 3 answers, 4 answers, 5 answers, 6 answers. And there are a number of other things that I could put up there. And it shows up as a PowerPoint. And I fill in the box with a question. I fill in the boxes for the answers. And you can't see it over here. There'll be a little key over on this side where I can indicate what is the right answer. So basically the setup of the system is open it up, go to it automatically goes into PowerPoint, and just fill it in like you would a PowerPoint slide.
Including with the graphics.
You can even put graphics on it, yes.
Will it work with PowerPoint alternatives, for example, LibreOffice or Mac versions?
I've never tried it, so I can't tell you whether it would or not.
Can you embed YouTube clips?
Yes.
Awesome.
Anything you can do in PowerPoint, you can do here. So basically when it comes up, it looks like just an add-on on top of PowerPoint. In fact, if you take a look, if I jumped out of here, go to the design, it looks just exactly like the PowerPoint slide. The only thing that makes it different is this tab over here that says Turning Point. Gives me a new menu bar, but it's just the menu, the bar, the commands that I need in order to execute the the Turning Point program.
You can keep asking questions, but we're going to have to switch computers.
All right. All right. If I could get the clickers back too, those are on loan from my students, and I'm sure they would like them back.
If they lose their clicker, do they have to pay for a replacement?
Yep.
What kind of reaction do you get from students to the clickers? What kind of reaction from students do you get when you use the clickers, when you introduce the clickers?
They like it. Yeah, I've done all sorts of different things in my class. This is just one. This is the one they seem to like. The one thing you do notice the first time you try anything, and I got this a number of times, the first time you try something, the response you would typically get is, Dr. Zollars should have lectured more. Okay. My biggest selling point on doing things active like this in the classroom was for years the percent of students who got less than a C in the class, and you have to get a C or greater in order to keep going on in our discipline. The number of students who got less than a C was about 30 to 35%. This last fall when I ran this, it was 14. So the students may not feel comfortable doing it when you get started, but it's sort of like, telling your kids, take the medicine, it's good for you. And when you can show the statistics that, the number or the percentage of people who are not getting through the class has been cut in half, That's a fairly persuasive argument. And once they get used to doing it, then it becomes second nature to them. I think the reason you get a lot of kickback first time is it's not what they've done before. And if there is one characteristic I would say of engineering students is they are really high achievers. And when you change the rules of the game on them, they don't like it. They've been very successful doing what they do for 14, 15 years, and now you turn it on them, and it's like, no, I like the old way better. But once they get accustomed to it, no, this is much better than lectures.
More questions? All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.